Right. Shotgun? Check. Smoke grenades? Check. Rabid My Little Pony repellent? Double check. It's the 5 games for Doomsday Expeditions. So, this is a series of interviews that I'm going to do with people who've been nominated for the Spiel des Jahres. Some will come out before the awards, and one at least, but maybe more, will come out after the awards. Usually, I get the opportunity to go to the ceremony, drink in the atmosphere, and find out what's sort of going on. But unfortunately, due to this shitty virus, we're not going to be able to do that this year. So I'm going to try and collect as many of the nominees as I can. For sure, some people will be left out, but fingers crossed it'll be as comprehensive as it can. Sit back, enjoy, and hopefully next year we'll be able to do the thing live. So I'm here with Tim Vernig, and you work for Thunderworks Games, and your connection to this year's Spiel des Jahres is Cartographers has been nominated for the Kenner Spiel des Jahres. So my first question is, what's the story behind Cartographers? How did Thunderworks get the game, and what was the development process, and what was your involvement with it?
Well, thanks, Ben. So my role with Thunderworks Games is I'm the brand ambassador. So Keith Matejka is the founder, the brains behind the operation, and the designer of Roleplayer, which is sort of our foundational game, the game that started it all in the Roleplayer universe. And what I do is I just sort of help with marketing and with social media and setting up our demo staff for conventions when we have conventions, and just coordinating all that. So that's what I do. But I would love to tell you the story of Cartographers. Let me first start off by saying that Cartographers was the little game that became a huge success. When Cartographers was published, it was meant to be sort of a filler. We never expected that it would be as popular as it was. So it was released last year in 2019, of course, and came out at around the same time that Lockup, which is also in the Roleplayer universe, was released. So Lockup and Cartographers were our 2019 releases. And we were just in the midst of finishing up the Kickstarter for the second expansion to Roleplayer, which was the Fiends and Familiars, which has just hit retail. And I think it's in retail in Europe or will be very soon. And Cartographers was just supposed to be this small box filler game that we would release. And, we thought it would just sort of roll out into literally the roll and write genre, and people would, pick it up and enjoy it. But we had no idea that it would be such a smash hit. And I think there's a couple of reasons why, which I'll go into in a few minutes. But let me just kind of back up and answer your question. So the sort of origin story of Cartographers was it was originally another game that was by the designer of the game, Jordi Adan. Jordi designed a game called Doodle Realms, and Doodle Realms had a very generic fantasy theme on it. So how this came about was one of our graphic designers, artists for the Roleplayer universe, Luis Francisco, pitched this game to Keith. He said, I found this game from a designer here who I think would fit perfectly into the Roleplayer universe. And Keith took a look at it and thought, yeah, we could retheme it into the Roleplayer universe, use artwork that was familiar to people who had played Roleplayer and kind of saw the artwork. And so when it came out, it was a pretty easy port over into Roleplayer. I think the thing that has struck a chord with people is, unlike a lot of roll and writes, this isn't purely a solo game or a solitaire game that you play with other people. The monster raid cards, for those of you who have played it, cause you to pass your map or your sheet to the player to either your left or to your right. They will then draw monsters on your map. And then when they hand your sheet back, you're going to take negative points for those unblocked monsters. And so this roll and write solitaire game became an interactive game where there is sort of a player interaction, and it's fun. I mean, you played it, so you know when you get your map back and someone has drawn monsters somewhere where it's very frustrating, so that when your turn to try to block those in may change your plans and what you're trying to work on for scoring. So it really, I think, has added something to that roll and write category that a lot of roll and writes didn't have.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it doesn't, and I mean this positively. It doesn't feel like a roll and write. Roll and writes, whilst fun, can feel mathematical, can feel quite abstract, whereas cartographers feels like a game set in a universe, and it feels thematic, right?
Yeah, and I think that what does that is not only the mechanics of the game, but also the artwork. So Luis Francisco and Lucas Ribeiro, who are artists, really, I mean, the artwork is amazing. I know the first time that Keith showed it to me and I looked at those seasons card artwork, I wanted to go to wherever that place was. I mean, especially spring, when you look at that little quaint sort of village or cabin, you just want to walk down that path and go into the world. So I think that makes it really engaging and immersive. But you're right. This is, we call it a roll and write because it sort of fits into that category generally of games, but it is truly a flip and write. There are no dice in it, which is ironic because this is in the Roleplayer universe, and Roleplayer is all about the dice. So here's the one game, Cartographers, that has no dice in it at all. So in this game, you're flipping a card over, and that card has the terrain type on it, and the shapes that you're allowed to draw that terrain type or choice of terrain types on your map. And then you draw it in that sort of polyomino design on the map and try to fit it together, puzzle it together to meet 4 scoring conditions that take place over the 4 seasons. So there is this, you're looking ahead and thinking, okay, this season I'm scoring these 2 scoring options, but later on I'm going to have 2 different ones, and eventually it's going to come back to the first one again. So you're always planning ahead to think, well, what can I score now and what can I score later?
And so how is the role player universe evolved? Because role player is a sort of comment on role playing games. You're rolling up a character, and I that's what really attracted me to that first game, because the idea that you turn creating a character in a fantasy role playing game into a game was really super interesting, and it was very familiar and wry and a little comic. How has the universe evolved, and what is the role-player universe now?
So I'm sure, Ben, you, like Keith and I, and probably many of your listeners, come from a background of fantasy role-playing games. We grew up playing role-playing games in our basement, kind of like in Stranger Things, spending many hours with Mountain Dew and junk food playing role-playing games. And so this came out of Keith's imagination, a game that would be the best part of a role-playing game, that is creating your character. That was the fun part. You'd roll the dice and you'd choose your stats, and you'd have your dump stat that you would take the low numbers and the ones that you wanted to be strongest at if you were wanting to be a barbarian or a mage or something like that. So Roleplayer came out of that part of role-playing games that Keith really enjoyed. And so he created this game around it where you're puzzling together the character by drafting dice of different colors and using the pip values to fit into the traits on your character card to fit certain criteria. So trying to get certain colors in a certain position, certain numbers, certain range of numbers to maximize the scoring. So that's where Roleplayer came from. And then, of course, to immediately follow that up, people said, well, now I've created the character. Well, why can't I go out and fight some monsters? And so the first expansion, Monsters and Minions, was born out of that. So now you have your character. And the second part is you can also use combat die to go out and fight a monster or its minion. And then the big boss monster at the end, which is always, the culmination of the adventure, right? To kill the big bad. So that was the Monsters and Minions expansion. And then the new Fiends and Familiars was why not add a familiar to your character and add some additional scoring opportunities. And then these pesky little fiends that attach to the dice drafting, so that if you take a certain die, you have to take a fiend, which gives some negative scoring or something that will keep you from scoring. And you have to banish the fiend by using charisma tokens or using gold or other cards to get rid of them. So now our current Kickstarter that we're running right now through the July 17th Roleplayer Adventures is really the magnum opus of the Roleplayer universe. This is the actual choose your own adventure story. So Roleplayer Adventure is going to be a cooperative game for 1 to 4 players where you'll go out on an adventure, and as you make decisions, those decisions will lead you down a certain story path to gain favor with certain factions in the story, or to pick up items and use those items in future adventures. And it is just like the Choose Your Own Adventure storybook. If you choose to fight the trolls, then you have to turn to page 37A and do whatever it says there. And if you make a choice there, you turn to another page. So there's a lot of replayability in the game. And so that's taken this Roleplayer universe, of which Cartographers is a part of, and really fleshes it out. So the world is very robust. I mean, it's not just a pasted on theme. This comes out of Keith's imagination. And then as the years have gone on and other people have become involved in this project, James and Peter Ryan are two of the other writers that wrote the storybooks for Roleplayer Adventures. They've created this world out of Keith's mind. And I would say it's just as detailed as Tolkien's universe or other fantasy universes. It has characters that are revisited that people will recognize. And there's lots of Easter eggs, things that appear in Cartographers will appear in Roleplayer Adventures. Things, characters that have been in the Monsters and Minion expansion appear in Adventures. So it all sort of ties together into a very beautiful, detailed world that people can really get immersed in.
And so a few things on Thunderworks. So how many people are employed by Thunderworks? Are you, for instance, a full-time employee, or is this sort of a part-time thing that you do next to something else?
Yeah, so it's not a full-time job for me. So I'm just good friends with Keith. I've known him for a number of years and help out when I can. But yeah, it's not a full-time gig for me. Now, the other people that are involved in the production of the games, the designers, the writers, these people are working on the projects and paid for the projects. But in reality, the only full-time employee of Thunderworks Games is Keith. But as the years have gone by, it begins to develop into a larger operation. And I would say it's probably not too many years away that it could very well be that there will be full-time employees. But really, Roleplayer was only released in 2016, so we're only 4 years into really the birth, so to speak, of Thunderworks.
And so tell us then, because I've spoken to people about the Spiel des Jahres for the last few years, and what's super interesting is that companies don't get an indication that they're going to be nominated. They find out at the same time as everybody else does. So can you tell us sort of where you were, where Keith was, when you realized that Cartographers had been nominated for the most prestigious game award in the world?
I think it was Jordy, the designer, who let Keith know. I'd have to double check with him on that, but I think that's what it was. But you're absolutely right. It is very interesting. Unlike other awards, like for example, like the Origins Awards or Dice Tower Awards, where we know we've been nominated. And it goes through kind of a viewer's choice or something like that kind of a process. The Spiel is chosen by industry people and people throughout the world. But you're right. We don't have any indication that we were nominated. And of course, when we found out, it's a huge honor because this isn't just a convention localized award. This is the Spiel is world renowned, and especially in Europe is very prestigious. Cartographers now is in 13 languages, and we continue to add languages to it. And so obviously it has a growing following in just 1 year around the world. And the nomination, I think, reflects that popularity. It reflects a game that I think has become even more popular with the current quarantine situation with the coronavirus. A lot of people have had to stay at home with their families, and Cartographers is a great game to play online virtually with friends because it's so simple to play. All you need to have is a PDF or a printout of the map, and you can play it over Skype or Slack or any other of the online gaming tools. So I think it's just a perfect game for this time as well.
And so, I just looked at the Roleplayer Adventures Kickstarter, and it's doing incredibly well. And Cartographers is clearly popular enough to be in many languages and also to be nominated for the Spiel des Jahres. But what kind of a difference would winning the Kenner Spiel des Jahres make for a company like Thunderworks?
Well, I mean, obviously it would be a huge honor. It means that people in the industry have seen this game as a game that is unique and is popular and that people really enjoy. And that would be a huge honor. I mean, I think in terms of what it does for a company, I don't think it's measurable in a direct sense, but it's always a great confirmation that what we're putting out is something that people really enjoy. I mean, board game publishing is a business, of course. You have to have income and money coming in from sales in order to produce more games. But in the end, the reason that we do it is because we want to publish games that people will enjoy. When I see posts on social media of people's cartographers maps, I can't tell you the joy that it brings me. It's just so exciting to see those maps and the way people have colored them and just their little doodles and things like that. It's so much fun to see that. And it means that it's resonating with people. And right now, in the current situation in our world, anything that brings people joy it brings me joy to see that. And I know we're very honored to be nominated, and that confirms that what we've done, what Jordy designed, and what Keith saw in this game when it was presented to him was we were on track. We published something that people really like.
And so finally, then, I live in Berlin, where the prize is awarded, and I like to go down every year and do an interview with all the nominees, and get a feeling of what the award is like. But sort of, how sad are you that the situation in the world is going to deny you that it'll have to be done online, and you won't be able to go to the award ceremony and stand in the hall and feel the atmosphere?
Well, it is a bit disappointing, of course, for all of the conventions that we won't be able to go to this year. Of course, Origins and Gen Con here in the States, and Essen in Europe, those were on the calendar. So these are all, of course, let down to not be able to do that. But ultimately, the nomination in itself is the award, and we may not be able to be there, but we'll celebrate with everyone virtually if we win, and if we don't, we will be incredibly honored to be among the other nominees, who are all fantastic games, and we would not be. We'll be happy to win. But we would not be disappointed to lose to some of the great competition that we have.
Brilliant. Well, Tim, thank you so much for giving over your time. And I wish you and Keith and everyone connected to cartographers the best of luck in the Spiel des Jahres.
Well, thank you, Ben. I appreciate that. And if you don't mind, I just want to leave you and your listeners a little bit of a sneak peek into something that's coming later that's related to cartographers. So we have something in the works for fall or winter of this year, 2020, Cartographers Heroes, a standalone game that will be in the cartographer's vein with a new mechanism added into it, as well as some new maps that will be coming out as well. So everyone who's a fan of cartographers, keep your eyes open for that, to get more cartographers' goodness to the table.
Brilliant. Well, Tim Vernick, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me, and have a great day.
If you enjoyed this and you want to support the show, you can do that by going to patreon.com/5G4D.